Greetings and salutations. So good to see you all one more time. I am Jay Gideon Winfrey, licensed therapist, and this is another episode of Sound Mind. As always, I want to thank you so much for your support. Y'all are just great. Such a blessing to not just Sound Mind, but also the whole entire Hope TV platform. Just want to thank you so very, very much. Thank you for the love that you've shown over the past 2 seasons that I've been the host, but particularly in season 7, just thank you so much for the feedback. So let's go ahead and dive right on in, because I think this is going to be one of my favorites of all time, because I really enjoyed putting this together in this particular episode, okay? This is our 3rd episode of season 7. I'm sorry, 4th episode of season 7. And if you have not had an opportunity to see the other 3 episodes where we talked about the psychology of temptation, I really, really want to encourage you to go and review that whole series, because we touched on some very, very relevant things, okay? For those that may not know me, I am a 26-year clinical practitioner. I've worked in a variety of different elements and different environments, and I am a faith-based clinical practitioner. So basically, everything that I do is generated not just from my clinical training and my formal education, but driven by my faith. I believe in the concept of what I call a psycho-spiritual approach with my population that I treat in my individual practice. But I also, most importantly, believe in blending the sacred with the secular, because I've seen in my population where utilizing that approach is very effective with helping people get a holistic healing and to see the progress and growth in their life. So I believe in touching on the spiritual aspect as importantly as the mental aspect, okay? So just a little bit about me if you're just coming in and tuning in. So let's go ahead and dive in with this episode. As I said, I really enjoyed putting this one together in the manner in which God revealed it to me. And I want to share a little bit about what this particular episode was going to entail. So the title of this particular episode is Before I Let Go, the 3 Ps, okay? So let me repeat that again. The title of this particular episode is Before I Let Go, the 3 Ps. And this is going to be a 2-episode dynamic, because what I want to do is really be able to take my time with it and make sure that you really understand all of the concepts and all of the tools that we present on every episode of Sound Mind, because I really want you to get it. So I don't want to be rushed, because I really want these things to be life-changing. I want these things to lead to some conversations that lead to conviction, which ultimately leads to conversion, okay? That's always the goal here at Sound Mind, is to have conversation that leads to some conviction, which ultimately leads to conversion, okay? So, before I let go, the 3 Ps. So, as always, we're gonna go through a couple of different dynamics where we're gonna talk about the relevance, which is basically the history and why this particular subject matter is important, and also the particular areas of behavioral health, mental health, and psychology that this particular episode will address. And what I want to do is, moving forward, I want to specifically be able to identify the areas where each episode will be able to address a particular dynamic as it relates to mental health, behavioral health, counseling, whatever, just to tell you exactly what area I've utilized this in my practice and when I've seen it be the most beneficial for people that I've worked with, okay? So we're gonna go over relevance and go probably over at least one of the first Ps, maybe 2, depending on how time is, but this is definitely gonna be a 2-episode dynamic, so you'll have plenty of time to absorb it. Get your pen, get your paper, take everything down that you need to, because this is really, really life-changing. Now, as I said, I utilize this in my practice, particularly when I'm working with individuals as it relates to couples, communication, self-esteem. This is a tool that I utilize and I developed about 5 years ago. It came to me in my reading, in my research, in my prayer, how to move people along and how to help people understand when is the right time to say certain things and when's the right time to move. Sometimes people are very hesitant to make certain moves and actions because they haven't really had the opportunity to really gather their thoughts, gather their emotions. And as a result, they get stuck and sometimes make the wrong decisions, okay? And so with this particular tool, with the 3 Ps, it's gonna help us to be able to move through that process in a 3-tiered manner, okay? So it's 3 levels to it, three tiers to it. And let me explain to you the overall concept of the 3 Ps. Okay, now, as it relates to relevance, okay, this is relevant from a clinical regard in these following areas. As I said, I utilize this in my practice as it relates to helping people with communication, as it relates to being more effective in their family communications, particularly with my married couples. I use this a lot when I separate my husband and wives from one another and work with them one-on-one. This is something that I really, really promote, and it's very successful. A lot of people come back and say, hey, the 3 Ps worked in our communication because they were able to make it more effective based by utilizing this tool. So again, I utilize this for communication, but then also for people that have challenges with self-esteem, decision-making, self-doubt, faith and trust. Those are the core areas that I tend to use this particular tool with, and that's what makes it relevant, okay? So I just wanna start out the episode by introducing the core areas. So if you hear any one of these areas that may be a challenge for you, please take this down and please implement it. If there's any questions about it, I would love to work with you one-on-one, so feel free to contact me through my practice, which is Valiant Therapy, VALIANTTHERAPY.com, valianttherapy.com. So again, this is the area of clinical expertise, but here's where it's important with the 3 Ps. And here's what the 3 Ps are, okay? The first P is pray. The second P is process. The third P is present, okay? So once again, the 3 Ps are pray, it's P number 1, process, P number 2, present, P number 3, okay? And the reason why this is so important and so relevant and so effective is a lot of times when we are attempting to communicate, we do it wrong. We do it very ineffectively. And what I found in working with couples and individuals over my 26-year career, oftentimes when people get frustrated in a situation, what they end up doing is they end up presenting before they've had the opportunity to process, let alone pray. So what I mean by that is when a person gets caught up in a moment, when a moment gets the better of them, people tend to have a tendency to just say whatever. And we know what that looks like sometimes when you're in a relationship and you're having a conversation and somebody says something that you don't like. You know, your husband says something to you that rubbed you the wrong way. Your girlfriend says something to you that made you think, okay, you're talking to me crazy. And immediately we just go in. And when we go in, it's very impulsive. It's not thought out. And sometimes the consequences of that just makes the situation that much worse. And when I looked at a lot of the challenges that people were having when it came to communication, but then not just that, but also with issues regarding self-esteem, faith and trust, it seemed to be that impulsivity in those moments or where decisions need to be made or when things need to be communicated, that tended to be where people tended to have the biggest issues, that they just said whatever in the moment, they went with it, and then the regret, oh, I wasn't thinking, I had this on my mind, I had that on my mind, they came at me wrong, and so now everything is just blown up and we have a much greater situation on our hand that we could have addressed and managed a little bit differently if we had just taken some time to go through the process of just literally looking at our thoughts, our feelings, and being able to really pull that in and filter through that before we just said whatever and did whatever, okay? So we get communication wrong because oftentimes our delivery, the delivery can be misinterpreted, it can be mistimed, and as a result, with the best of intentions, sometimes we don't say the things that are the most effective. So we present wrong. We process wrong because oftentimes we just go with the first thoughts that we have. In addition to going with the first thoughts that we have, we also have a tendency as human beings to go with the worst thoughts. So we go with the first thoughts and the worst thoughts. For some reason, we just think worst case scenario all the time, and then we act on it. Sometimes with my couples, if there's some issues in the relationship and say there's somebody that calls and the other partner doesn't answer. And if there have been some issues in the past, the first thing that they think about is somebody doing somebody wrong, or somebody doing somebody dirty, or doing something sneaky. First thought often is the worst thought. And when you don't take time to process through that, you can make a situation worse and add some issues to a relationship that really could be avoided. We do that on our job sometimes. If our supervisor reaches out to us, automatically we think, what'd I do wrong? Am I about to get written up, okay? So a lot of times our processing is wrong. But then when it comes to praying, sometimes we even do that wrong. And often we pray wrong from the perspective of we may not even pray, or if we do pray, we pray from a place of being angry. And it's not very fluid. So a lot of times when a situation happens, we present it wrong with our delivery, we process it wrong with our worst thoughts that we can imagine, and then we pray wrong because sometimes we don't even pray at all. So what I found was what we tend to do is we tend to present, go off of the impulse first, then we process from the place of being angry and from the place of being upset, and sometimes not even having all the facts. So we process wrongly, and then we may not even pray about it. So that process is ineffective because at that point we've already had a consequence that we've ushered and we've executed with people. And so now we have to deal with the repercussions of being wrong and loud, as my mama used to say. Ain't nothing wrong, and nothing worse than being loud and wrong. So what I found was the way that we do it, if we flip it, invert it, it keeps us from having problematic situations that could be an issue for us to deal with in our relationships and in our overall manner in which our reputation is known for how we tend to interact with things, okay? So when you think about the 3 Ps, again, pray, process, present, what we tend to do is we present, then we process wrongly, and then if we pray at all, we pray from a position of adversity at that point, because now we got consequences that are tied to everything we had just done.
We're showing you how to make yellow rice today. Nice fluffy rice. Look at that beauty.
Now we're gonna smother these ribs. We're gonna let them cook for about 45 minutes or so. I want them so tender, meat falling off the bone.
Today, we face an unprecedented crisis. Tens of millions of refugees have been forced from their homes. But you can make a difference. Turn disruption and despair to hope and opportunity. Even small amounts make a big difference. Provide shelter, support, or jobs in your community. The more we understand, the greater sense of belonging we create. Act now. Visit supportcrisisrelief.org.
There's a decline in blood donations. Talk to us about why should we give blood?
When you donate, you save 3 lives. So I think this is a great thing, like your platelets, your whole blood, and your plasma is split up. So it's not going directly to one patient, but it's actually being split up and it's going to 3 different patients.
So what we want to do is we want to pray, process, then present, okay? So let's get that on the table first. Now, still up under the relevance category, because if you remember from the first part of the episode where I told you what the name and the title was, the name of the title is Before I Let Go, okay? Before I Let Go, the 3 Ps. Now, this is where we're going to blend a little bit of the secular with the sacred, okay? Because as I was developing this, what I heard was, and all of us are family here at Hope TV, and particularly with us being in a predominantly African-American church and African-American community, We all know what happens when we hear Frankie Beverly and Maze, particularly the song Before I Let Go. You put that on at any family reunion, you put that on at any wedding, everybody's gonna get up and there's gonna be some electric slide going on, there's gonna be some dancing regardless of the age. To the younger generation that heard Beyonce's version, that was cute, that was nice, but the OG, the original, was indeed Frankie Beverly and Maze. So when I thought about this particular model and tool that I utilize, I heard the lyrics where Frankie is singing 4 parts, where he says, I really love you, you should know. I want to make sure I'm right before I let go. Now, that's going to be how we're going to ride it with the sacred and the secular. But we're going to use, we're going to invite Brother Frankie Beverly to come to, not actually on the show, we're going to invite him to the pulpit, or to the desk rather, in this capacity, because he's going to help me with this as far as that particular phrase. Because that's really what we're wanting to do when you're talking about praying, processing, presenting. He's basically saying, when he says, I really love you, he's saying my feelings towards you. And then when he says, you should know, he's saying the evidence of my feelings. And when he says, I want to make sure I'm right, what he's saying is, I want to be in alignment. I want to get the facts. I want everything to be solid. And then when he says, before I let go, before I move, speak, arrive to a conclusion, leave, or make a decision, all right? So that's what we want to utilize as we go into the first P, which is to pray, okay? So going with the 3 Ps, our first P is to pray. And pray is the first filter. You can say pray, prayer, doesn't really matter. But praying is the first filter, okay? So with prayer being the first filter, if we take that and we go with what the good brother Frankie Beverly is saying, this is the before part. In our phrase, before I let go, this is the before. So when you think pray, this is what we want to do before, all right? So y'all know how I get down. I always give you a definition of terminologies that we use so we can make sure that we're walking and rocking together, so we have a mutual understanding of what it is that we're flowing with, and so we can go through the process together, well-informed, okay? So when we look at the first P, which is pray, the thing that really stood out to me in my research is that pray from a part of speech is a verb. So what we're saying is action, out the gate. Pray and praying is an action. It's something that we have to do before we make any decision, before we do anything. We have to pray because it's so important because of the 2 components that prayer typically has to it. Now, what I tend to practice and promote is that prayer, by its definition, has 2 components. It has supplication and communication. And I think that's a beautiful thing that occurs when a person gets to the point in their prayer life where you understand that prayer is not just asking for things, it's also just basic communication. It's basic conversation about whatever's going on in your life. Now, the way that I promote this in my practice is that a lot of the different theories that I know that promote, open conversation and dialogue, cognitive behavioral, rational emotive behavioral therapy, positive psychology, Gestalt, all these are basic talk therapies. But a lot of times what takes therapy to another level is that I tend to want to model what it is that I see biblically and then infuse it with what I know clinically. So in saying that, when it comes to prayer, our basic conversations should be like our prayer life. I often tell patients, I can tell a person's communication pattern, excuse me, based on how their prayer pattern is. So with prayer being a conversation that we have that's not just based on asking, but also just having basic conversations about how we feel about certain things, how we process certain things. It's just talking, and it's a very intimate act. So prayer is a blueprint for how we should be communicating with ourselves, first of all with God, but then secondly with ourselves and with others, okay? Having a conversation not just about when I want something or when there's a complaint, but when I'm just basically talking, okay? So just try to implement that in your relationships where you have conversations with God, but then have conversations with yourself, honest dialogue, based on not asking anything, but just basic conversation, just talking. I think that's a very intimate practice that really takes your self-understanding and your relational maturity to a whole nother level. We don't have to have a reason to talk. Like, we don't have to have a reason to pray and talk to God just because we want that engagement in that conversation. And we just want to spend that level of intimacy together, just talking. It's a beautiful thing if you keep it ongoing and keep it relevant. Excuse me. So our operational definition for pray is defined as the following. We're going to define pray as a solemn request to address, express thanks to God, okay? So again, our operational definition is a solemn request to address, express thanks to God, okay? So what we have here is, first of all, we have request, which is supplication, but then we have addressing. We're talking about specific issues, okay? Specific things that are going on. But then also to express. We're talking about our feelings. And thanks to God, saying appreciation. So again, using that as the blueprint of our communication practices, these are things that we should be utilizing in our basic communication practices with human beings as well, those that we love. We want to address things, ask for things, talk about our feelings, but then be appreciative. But in terms of the 3 Ps, okay, as far as processing is concerned, the reason why prayer is so important is that it's the first filter, okay? I say that all the time. One of the things I love about prayer and how I try to also mirror that in therapy is that prayer is the most genuine, authentic, and rawest filter you can have. Because you can go to God and say whatever and whenever, and what I love about our Father is that He's not gonna throw it back in your face. Now, you know how we do in our relationships, when people say things to us and we talk about it, and then first thing we do when we get mad, we throw it back up in people's face. I love the fact that God doesn't do anything like that. And what I try to promote, particularly with my couples in my practice, is to emulate the same behavior, because we want to make certain that we feel as if our loved ones can look at us and see us to be a place of safety, to see us to be a place of solitude and refuge. And it's hard for people to do that if when you get upset, you say things to them that they entrusted to you when you all were in a different place. So some things will just be off limits. And that's the beautiful part about prayer, is that God don't run and tell anybody. And you can talk to Him for hours. He's not gonna be scrolling on his phone. He's not gonna tell you, hold up, Jerusalem's calling, I gotta take that call. He's gonna be there as long as you are and as long as you wanna be engaged. And so that's the beautiful part about prayer. And that's why before we do anything else, we wanna make certain that we pray, because it's the rawest filter. So when you're the most upset, when you're the most bothered, you have the opportunity to utilize that filter and not worry about somebody throwing it back in your face because you were upset. So that's the part about prayer that I love.
How in the world did this country girl end up on a platform with Ricky Dillard?
Don't make your social media page private, please. Ricky Dillard just simply inboxed me, and sure enough, he called. We spoke about a rehearsal in Atlanta. I showed up my first rehearsal date. He asked me, was there any song on the record that I would like to sing? And I said, I feel comfortable singing Best Day. And he was like, okay, cool, let's go.
You budget. You pay bills.
Yet somehow, like me, are
80% more likely than men to live in poverty in retirement.
So here's what we're gonna do now. We're going to save ourselves by setting a goal to save 2% more of our income for our retirement.
Why 2? 1% honors you.
And 1% honors all womankind.
So come on, learn more about the 2% challenge at WeSaySaveIt.org.
In the morning, what are some of the first things that are important to you as far as your grooming in the morning? Like,
I used to be what they call a metrosexual. I used to get manis, pedis, and facials, and I'm just starting back to getting my facials and stuff done.
You know, I remember, it's funny that both of you brought up the metrosexual part of it, because I just remember that used to be the thing. For a while, that was the thing. If you went and got groomed, you know, that was a label that you got. And y'all excuse me, but I used to correct folks quick. Like, I'm not even metrosexual. I'm just sexual. That's just it. So don't put no label on me. Don't put nothing on me.
Completely. I got to use that one.
I said I was just well groomed.
No. If you want to give me a label, give me the right one.
Yeah.
But that's just, you know. But I have learned that it's okay too. For me to groom
absolutely.
myself.
Now, the word pray has Latin origins. You know, I always love to give y'all the breakdown of words as far as their origins. So the Latin origin of the word pray actually comes from a word called precari, and that's spelled P-R-E-C-A-R-I. But wait, it gets better. There is another evolution of the word pray that comes before the Latin origin of precari, and it's what they call the late Latin origin, which is called precare, all right? So you see where we're going with it? So with prayer being the first P, it's basically saying that before we do anything, we want to take the energy and the time to pre-care, meaning I care enough to make sure that we right, I'm right. Let me make sure everything is straight by first addressing how I feel in the dynamics, okay? So the definition of pre-care that we're gonna use for what we're talking about is to wish or hope strongly for a particular outcome or situation. So when we pray, that's what we're doing. When we pray, we are wishing and hoping strongly for a particular outcome or situation. So there's a lot of thinking that goes on at the front end of things when you're talking about the first P in prayer, okay? But where we go wrong is, okay, is oftentimes we pray after the fact or not at all. After we've blown up the spot, after we've done something that we regret, now we want to pray. That's typically what we do. Or we don't pray at all, okay? And if we do pray, it's so tense and consequence filled because we moved out of line and out of pocket, and now we've made the situation a lot more worse, simply because of how we approached it, okay? So that's where we go wrong. Now, how do we get it right? We pray before we go in it, and we pray while we go through it. That's why the first P is pray. Before you address a situation, before you approach it, before you do anything, you pray. Because remember, prayer is us showing that there's a pre-caring that we do before we do anything. That's where the Latin origin of the word pray comes from, is a pre-caring that we do. And we're taking the time to make a request, to address and express to God the most solemn place that we can, the most secret place we can, to make certain that we can filter things through first, okay? So that's important. Prayer, the biggest benefit in this dynamic and in this model is that it's the realest and most raw and safest platform that you can use, okay? I promote this in my practice, it works. I do this in my own personal life. I tend to not want to say anything until I've prayed about it, because I know my mouth, I know me. I tell my patients all the time, I know me. Eyes know me. So oftentimes, if I'm upset about something, I really need to pray first, because what I don't want to do is, because what the good word says is there's power there's power of life and death in the tongue. So I'm very mindful of what I say. And so typically, let me pray for the situation first. I can go to God and just say, you know what, God, I don't like what happened. I don't feel that was cool. It feels unfair. That was mistreatment. I don't know how much longer I can maintain in this position. That's just being real and raw. And so when you pray, that first impulse that we tend to feel, that first instance of just being raw and out of control, we can have that opportunity to show that with God, and then automatically it filters the first layer of things that we may experience. And so oftentimes when we go wrong is that rawest part of us tends to come out immediately, and then as a result, we end up having negative interactions that are now even worse because now we've added things to it to make it more complicated and even more hurtful because we just went straight into the presentation part. We just said whatever, and we didn't filter it. So the first P is pray. Now, going back to the good brother Frankie Beverly, this is the before part. Remember what he said, before I let go. Okay, he wants to make sure he's right before he lets go. Okay, so this is the before part, all right? So that is our first P, okay? So what we've done in this episode is we have gone over the relevance as it relates to the clinical practice occurrences where I've used this and where I see it to be of a benefit. We talked about how we get it wrong in terms of we present wrongly in our delivery, we process wrongly in our thoughts, and then we pray wrongly because sometimes we don't even pray. So therefore, we've already worked a situation in a negative space because we haven't done the processing part that comes with praying and then processing. Okay, we talked about how we blended in what the good brother Frankie Beverly said as far as, you know, I want to make sure I'm right before I let go. And that's what this whole tool is about, is making sure that we're right emotionally, right spiritually, right frame of mind, just right before I let go, before I move, before I make a decision, before I do anything. I need to be able to process it through, okay? And we talked about the first filter, which is pray. Prayer, praying, whatever you want to refer to it as is fine, it's cool, as long as we're doing something related to pray, because praying is the first filter, all right? It's the first filter. And so keeping that in mind, we're able to move forward because we understand that we want to have that intimate time with God so that we can process the rawness of however we feel, because we don't want to project that on somebody that we love or somebody that we're in a relationship with or somebody that we have a mutual respect for. And that's the benefit of the first P, which is pray, okay? So we covered that in the first episode, well, the first part of this episode. So what we'll be doing in the next episode is we're going to go over the second and third Ps. Now, the second P is process. Third P is present. And I'm going to tie it all together for you so you can see how when we pray and we process, then we present, that's how we let people know that we're right before we let go, okay? So go and listen to Frankie Beverly and Maze's song, Before I Let Go, and be able to see how it all comes together. And it's okay if you want to bust out an electric slide in your living room. It's okay. I'll write the prescription for it. It's no big deal. So hope you enjoyed this particular episode. We will be back to do the part 2 of this in the next episode. And as always, thank you for your support. And you know how we do at the end. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he turn his loving smile and countenance towards you, blessing you in your going out and coming ins. And may he give thee shalom peace. I am Jay Gideon Winfrey, licensed therapist, and may the Lord watch between you and me while we are away from one another. And I will see you next time. Take care. Love y'all. Bye.